Welcome on in. This is the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Today, we are discussing the Underdiscussed. We're talking about the players with ADPs within the top 10 rounds, but yet the discourse on these players seems to be awfully quiet, not getting a whole lot of traction on the Twitter sphere, not getting a lot of discussion in fantasy football circles, but hey, they're constantly getting drafted in 100% of drafts. We got to understand why and why they're being taken where they are. Let's start the show. Welcome on in. This is the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, John McKechnie. That is Mario Puig. We are into August. The Hall of Fame game takes place later on tonight. So football is officially back before, again, it's officially back for week one. But yeah, we're going to see real live people hitting each other, and they're not wearing the same uniform. Pretty cool. So excited for that, or, for about the 5 minutes in which it's somewhat watchable, and then, oh well. But either way, it's a good signpost that we're getting close to the season, draft season, like really heating up as we speak. So the essential premise of today's show is we're going to be talking about guys that everyone knows, everyone has heard of, their household names, but for whatever reason in the narrative carousel that is fantasy football this draft season, these guys aren't really getting like that polarizing tag where there are camps of, oh, I love drafting this guy, or, oh, I'm fading this guy for whatever reason. They're just kind of flying a little bit under the radar. And we're kind of laying the constraints of this to guys going in like the second round all the way into like the 10th, 11th round. So guys that are getting drafted in 100% of formats, but still not having a ton of discourse about them. But before we jump in there, Mario, we kind of opened this segment last week, and I want to keep it going. What is the silliest thing you've seen in terms of training camp buzz this week?
Well, to be fair, it's only been a small segment of like the fantasy news media sphere, but the kind of flippant, super irrelevant comment of one Dallas area beat writer, not even like a beat writer. He's just like a radio guy. He doesn't even have sources. He's never been a reporter. He just kind of has been around Dallas and talking about the Cowboys for a long time. He said on the first day of Dallas's training camp that clearly Rico Dowdle was the best running back on the team. And we don't even know who was participating on what basis. We don't know what kind of drills they were running. You need not know it, though. All you need to know is that, well, Rico Dowdle is clearly the best one. And that's definitely a narrative that some people have been primed for and have been waiting for validation on. And so there's been this group of eagerly, these people who are just like eagerly lapping it all up and being like, oh my God, the prophecy is true. This is great. We knew it all along. And it's very strange because at the very least, it's like, you guys must not have seen many training camps, right? You must not have been following football very long. And most people forget them, I guess. But like, John, I would imagine you as well remember a lot of cases of guys getting training camp hype, on some bases more solid than others. But even a lot of the cases more solidly founded than the Dowdle hype cases have burned out and just, become completely forgotten on again,
Darwin Thompson.
Darwin Thompson. So the weird thing about the Dowdle hype is that one thing I can guarantee you is that all the people who like him, all the people who are pushing him, don't know anything about him. And what I mean about they don't know anything about him is they don't know his history at South Carolina. They don't know his athletic testing. They don't know the kinds of production that he had at South Carolina. Or I'll concede this possibility. Anyone who's high on Dowdle and also hypes Tavian Feaster, they might be onto something. But when you're a backup to Tavian Feaster at South Carolina and you get outplayed by Tavian Feaster at South Carolina, when you have to lose carries, not just carries, a lot of snaps you lose to guys like Mon Denson, Tyson Williams, AJ Turner, probably someone else that I'm forgetting. that's just crazy to suggest that someone like that is some sort of locked NFL prospect. Like, we're talking the deepest parts of the fringe at this point. And think what you will about someone like Royce Freeman. Obviously, he was not, as great of an NFL prospect as he seemed coming out of Oregon. But Royce Freeman, if he had played at South Carolina, would not have been splitting snaps with AJ Turner, with Mon Benson. So you gotta know details about players before you make solid opinions about them. And it's interesting that, to me anyway, it's interesting that in the Dowdle market's case, clearly the proponents they've read something about Dowdle. They've seen something about him. They think they know something about him, but it's all secondhand accounts. It's hearsay. It's generalizations that they don't scrutinize. And it's going to be really, really funny when they all have to pretend none of this happened. And I don't mean next year. I mean in 2 months. This will be a speed run of the Tank Bigsby thing, where it's just like, what? I don't remember talking about that. I don't remember that at all. But let's just move on. Why don't we?
I mean, for the record, like, I had a bad take that I really paid for last year in drafts, and it was in a kind of similar end of the ADP pool as Rico Dowdle. Like, I thought that, again, being a bit of a James Cook doubter, I thought Damian Harris was a really good pick. That didn't pan out, although albeit for
literally
injury
got hurt
reasons. Yeah. But even still, it hurt the same. But
hey,
I think
at least Damian Harris started at Alabama. He wasn't like the RB7 at some crap school.
Yeah, for a bad South Carolina program that hasn't been good since Clowney was there.
Clemson's number 3 or 4 running back went there and put them all on the bench, including Dowdle. So whatever. This is one of the dumbest, most lowly eras of fantasy football media behavior. It's crazy how bad this is.
So with that in mind, I mean, we know that Operation Fade Dowdle has been on basically since the start of draft season. But what's the exposure rate looking like for you when it comes to Zeke? And is there a possibility where Royce is finding his way onto maybe your 17th, 18th round selections?
I took Royce on my Scott Fishbowl team because there's like 22 rounds, but in 18-round drafts, I'm probably just not picking any Dallas running back. If any of them, probably Zeke, but usually Zeke is gone by the point, or maybe I've already taken my running back 4 or 5 or whatever it is in the budget. For whatever reason, I haven't taken Zeke a whole lot, but Dowdle, worst pick on the board. Totally ridiculous. It's embarrassing. Everybody who's hyping it right now will very quick. I'm talking October 15th. They'll pretend like none of this ever happened.
Exactly. Yeah, they are. They've already set a reminder on their phone calendars, delete any and all Rico Dowdle tweets from the summer.
Well, they think it's going to work right now, but it's because they've looked at only the fan fiction lore and not any of the real world, data. And we are not playing Dungeons and Dragons. I'd rather do it. I'd rather play Dungeons and Dragons than whatever this is. But this is not how it works. Guys who back up Tavian Feaster don't start in the NFL, especially. Look, Dowdle has crap NFL production too. I don't mean to reduce it to just a South Carolina career. His NFL career has been crap, basura. So we'll see soon enough. And again, it'll just never be brought up ever.
Yep. No, it will not. And we'll be too busy during the regular season to bring it up on the pod. But I don't know. We are petty, so we very well might find a way. Let's move on into the meat of the episode. But before that, we do have a message from our friends over at Circa. The biggest pro football contests in Vegas are back. Circa Survivor and Circa Million are now up to $16 million in guaranteed prizes. 2 ways to win and no rake. Circa Survivor contests select one team each week with no point spread. The longest to win it all will win it all. Or the longest will win it all with $10 million guaranteed. In Circa Million, make 5 picks against the spread each week for your share of $6 million guaranteed. Quarterly and full season payouts are all included in that Circa Million. Enter in Nevada, play from anywhere. Again, that's visit circasports.com for details. Circasports.com For more details, that's Circa Survivor over there and the Circa Million. We also got a message from our friends over at Blue Wire. And we're back. Look at that. All right, onward to some of the under-discussed players in the fantasy landscape for this season. We'll start out aiming a little bit high. We'll go with the guy who slipped a little bit of late in the ADP. He's got the dreaded downward pointing red arrow on our best ball data. You can check that out over on RotoWire.com. Go to the ADP section. Super useful way to get in tune with the market. But Davante Adams, he's down at 20.6 is his ADP over on Underdog. A guy who I think unquestionably, even at age 31, is one of the top talents at the receiver position in the league. But, he was wide receiver 19 last year. He is 31. I don't know if the offense necessarily got markedly better. I mean, I think he's kind of a lock for, if he stays healthy, like a 10 target per game type of pace. But that was the case last year, and he was 6.5 yards a target and like a lot of dud weeks baked in there. He had a few, great weeks where he was obviously helping your team in a significant way, but still, wide receiver 19 is not what you're paying for when you take him in the late second round. So what are we thinking when it comes to Davante Adams this season? Because no one seems to be like pounding their chest like, hey, look who I got.
Right. You don't really want to fade a guy like Adams because he's shown what he can do. He can be the wide receiver 1 in fantasy, and he can do it with some distance from the wide receiver 2. I just don't think, especially at this age, I don't think he's going to be able to do it with these quarterbacks because Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew are both bad. Like, they're not even good by backup quarterback standards. So granted, Adams has produced with some, and it's not just with Aaron Rodgers that he's produced, but to me, it feels like the upside just isn't high enough to justify the risk or at that price anyway. It doesn't. There's no way I can see an Aiden O'Connell, Gardner Minshew quarterback rotation throwing for more than, 3,700 yards. The Raiders don't want to throw the ball, not just because those quarterbacks are bad, but they don't, as a general approach, want to throw the ball. They want to make games short. They want to make games slow. They want to give their defense a lot of rest. They want to give their offense short fields. They aren't going to throw the ball a lot, but that the quarterbacks are that bad will definitely give them additional reason to keep the ball in the ground and to not run too many plays. So Jacoby Myers, he's not exactly a player that I'm picking this year, but he's still a really good player, an overqualified player for the role that they have, for the usage that they likely have waiting for him. Brock Bowers, I think, will be implemented right away. Tom Telesco is a terrible GM, but he probably is smart enough to know that the calls for his next firing will happen that much sooner and be that much more indignant if he doesn't get Bowers going right away. And I'll give Telesco that much credit. I will say this though, I still think we might need to wait to see where Adams is actually playing this year, because if they trade him to the 49ers for Ayuk and some trade of cap hit and or picks, that would not be shocking, and it would very much change my outlook on Adams. Because if Adams were playing with the 49ers, I guess I'd pick up like 10th overall or something. I don't know.
So is there any world in which you'll try to take Davante, over the next week or two in hopes that
Not
he
really
does get moved? No,
because it's
too big of a spec.
There's no actual indication that that'll happen. It's just, to me, it makes sense, especially if the 49ers are being so stingy toward Ayuk. It's like, well, just trade him then. Pay him or trade. Don't do whatever this is unless it's for some reason, and waiting to save like $750,000 per year. That doesn't seem productive to me. So if they can, if given their window, i.e. whenever they have to pay Purdy, it makes sense to me to get a guy who can definitely be a win now piece like Adams, as Ayuk would be. But Adams is cheaper right now at this point, and they might be able to, get like a second or third round pick for their trouble and be as much or more competitive this year.
Yeah, it's interesting how those two guys, like there's been linkage between the two as potential, like, trade swap partners that go right next to each other in the ADP. So yeah, definitely keeping an eye on what may or may not happen with the Raiders and Davante Adams, and of course with the Niners and Brandon Ayuk. But I think, yeah, bottom line here when it comes to Adams, if he is on the Raiders to start the season, target share will be great. I don't think that any of the additions really like change our projection as far as how much he's getting fed, but I'm just dubious that the combo of Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew it drastically improve his yards per target enough to where, he ends up being worth it. And, I'm concerned like you are with just the sheer volume of passing touchdowns coming from this offense.
Yeah, so Adams, I think, would be hard pressed to draw, let's say, a third of the targets for the Raiders. Let's just say he does, though. If they're only throwing for 3,500 yards, then for a ceiling, we're talking probably 1,300 yards, and a floor, I don't even want to think about the floor. But yeah, to me, there's just, at the very least, there's better alternatives, I feel like. And so I am not drafting a whole lot of Davante. And if he gets traded to the 49ers, I'll be like, crap.
Would the floor look like Deontay Johnson's famous 0 touchdown season?
It could. I will say Davante Adams is definitely better enough than Deontay Johnson to put 2 or 3 scores on the board, but it's not a second round return that I'm thinking of in that case. All the same.
No, I don't either. So just wanted to kind of set the record straight on Adams, see where we're at. It was interesting to me that his ADP's been, it's never been that low since he became the Davante Adams that we all know and love. But the fact that he finished wide receiver 19 last year, the team didn't get appreciably better, and it's like the market just collectively didn't blink and is going to take him at the same exact spot. And I just am not there with him at that particular price. I'm looking in other directions. Let's move forward. Let's go to DeVonta Smith. He's someone that's going a little bit later than these guys. He's like an early third round type of guy, ADP of 25.6 over on Underdog. New offensive coordinator there in Philly. Still has to compete with A.J. Brown, of course, for targets. Still got Jalen Hurts back there at quarterback, of course. It should be, all in all, like one of the better offenses in the league, but is spending a mid to early third round pick on a guy who's kind of at best capped to be the wide receiver 2. Is that smart? I mean, where are you at with DeVonta Smith?
Well, it seems to me like you're paying close to the ceiling, as far as the returns that he can give you. But that admittedly is it's just kind of like the market reality at the moment, especially on something like Underdog. Maybe it's a bad standard by the market of 5 years ago, but it's just not that market anymore. So practically speaking, you're going to get 0 Davante exposure unless you are willing to take him in this area. And I still, even now, don't really know what to think. I don't have a whole lot of Davante Smith. I might not have any Davante Smith exposure. And it's not because I want to fade him. It's just the way I think through things. And admittedly, maybe I'm not considering possibilities of just, injury to AJ Brown, especially. But whatever circumstance might bring about heightened usage, escalated usage for Davante Smith, he would produce in that case. The issue is not that I, doubt the player. And I believe in Davante Smith's ability to be a wide receiver 1 in the NFL, but I don't believe Davante Smith will ever be as good, let alone better than AJ Brown. So also, given that I believe Jalen Hurts should not throw the ball more than 30, maybe 32 times a game, it's not so easy for me to imagine the Eagles just airing it out and just feeding, both AJ Brown and Smith and Goddard. That's something that plenty of people can imagine, but I can't. So those are the reasons, I guess, that I don't end up with Davante Smith. But I guess I will say, and the more drafts I do, the more I'll have to think about this. You do at some point have to diversify just for injury reasons, and not just in the sense like I got to stop taking AJ Brown and start covering myself with DeVonta Smith insurance or whatever, but just like if AJ Brown were to miss time, then if God forbid AJ Brown were to miss, 12 games or something, then DeVonta Smith could pretty easily, I think, become a 1,400 yard receiver, and stuff like that happens. But it's not what I'm thinking of the first, 10 times I draft.
I just kind of think, we're 3 years into DeVonta Smith's career. All of them have been very solid to, pretty good, pretty darn good. I mean, he was wide receiver 14 last year, so that's certainly worth like that mid third rounder. But I just don't really see, barring the injury to AJ Brown, like that much room for for development. Like I think that his peak season won't look too different from each of his first three, and he may very well have already had his peak season. So as like in my own approach to fantasy drafting, I'm trying, at least especially in the earlier rounds, like trying to time up a player's peak season. And I just think in DeVonta Smith's case, like it's good. It's just not great. And I think as long as AJ Brown is there, that's going to be the case. And I don't know. I'm like a little bit iffy on the Eagles generally this year, especially with how expensive all their, top rung fantasy options are. Like I just think losing Kelsey's huge. The new offensive coordinator, like I don't think Kellen Moore really makes anyone like all that excited. I wouldn't imagine. So I don't know. Things are a little confounding to me with Philly, and I think DeVonta Smith is a very solid player, but I think that you're not going to see like that double-digit touchdown season, barring some bad injury luck elsewhere on this roster.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I guess I would say additionally, I consider probably wider. What is this? Chris Olave, whatever he ranks as receiver, all the way down to DeVonta Smith, maybe DK Metcalf, Malik Neighbors. That's kind of a wide receiver dead zone to me, and that includes Davante Adams, Brandon Ayuk, Mike Evans. Those guys are going in that range, and I don't mean to say I doubt any of those players specifically. It's more just, to me, I have a projection for those kinds of players similar to the players that are going shortly after them, but not immediately. In some cases, a lot further later than them. Guys like DJ Moore, Stephon Diggs. I understand the concern. He's more of a best ball specific, because I do think that the Texans might spread the ball pretty well this year. Nico aside. But yeah, Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell, Pittman, Zay Flowers, George Pickens, all those guys I have projected similarly or better than players like Adams, Ayuk, Evans, DeVonta Smith. So again, the more teams that I draft, the sooner I'll need to think about things like my exposure rate over a big sample. But at the very least, I need to be picking like my 30th team before I start trying to hedge for scenarios like the one you just described of AJ Brown missing time. It's just not how maybe I should be quicker to draft along those considerations, but it's difficult for me to do it.
Well, when we have to put that number of qualifiers on it, I think that speaks volumes. And I think in Smith's case, like it's interesting to me, same as what I was saying about Davante Adams, where underwhelming last year relative to the draft costs, and yet the ADP doesn't really slip for this season. Like last year, the market was very similar. A lot of like wide receiver twos on good teams were going in the early third round. Most people were pretty disappointed with them, and yet they're right back in that same range of the draft. So I wonder if there's like a lesson out there that collectively the market isn't learning with some of these guys. But either way, when we have to say it, like I'll get Davante because I have too much of X, Y, or Z in the mid third round, and I'm only getting him for diversification purposes. It's just like it's not the strongest endorsement of him.
It's like telling someone to buy life insurance or something. It's like, great, thanks for the tip.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm gonna feel great about this.
So with that in mind, you mentioned one of these guys. I wanted to talk a little bit more about Michael Pittman. ADP right at 33. So later in the third round. Last year, ranked top 5 in target share. Some additions to this offense, of course, with AD Mitchell coming in, we could also expect some progression from guys like Josh Downs and Alec Pierce as well. But I think even still, like, it's hard to imagine Pittman having much less than like a 29% target share of this offense. The average depth of target wasn't great last year, but the catches were phenomenal, and the yardage, that's kind of what carried his fantasy value more than touchdowns. I understand the concern about accessing the Indianapolis offense from the pass catcher's perspective, because they're not going to be leading the league in pass attempts or really anything close to that with Anthony Richardson back there, but it could be explosive on like a per pass basis. And if nothing else, I just think it's going to be much better than the Gardner Minshew show that we saw for much of the year last year. So as I did some more digging, I personally don't have a ton of exposure to Michael Pittman, and that's partially why I wanted to talk about him, because, again, not a lot of like giant Michael Pittman stands out there in the wild. So where are you with Pittman as it pertains to this year, and how does it look compared to last year?
I like Pittman this year. I think it is understandable some of the concerns people might have about the passing volume and passing effectiveness of the Colts. But given that last year we saw 3.5 games of 21-year-old Anthony Richardson, and then the rest of the year was Gardner Minshew playing just awful football, then given what Pittman did in those conditions, I don't really believe that they can get a whole lot worse, or not. Or anyway, it's like, for it to get worse, it would just need to be the kind of bad luck that you would never anticipate, never have any reason to factor into projections. And so to me, it's nothing. But the basic deal with Pittman last year is he drew this is basically like 30% of the targets. I had the number calculated, but I don't know where I put it. But if you subtract the passing stats from the one game that Pittman missed, and just subtract the numbers from the overall passing activity of the Colts offense, Pittman drew something like 30.5% of the targets, and he easily outplayed the team baseline doing so, which is to say, not only was he drawing 30.5% or whatever, but he was constantly succeeding doing it. It was one of those cases where the returns were not particularly close to diminishing yet, and you would sooner have reason to believe he could handle 32% target share and still hold serve before you would suggest that, we got to scale it back a little. So you're right, though. Pittman might draw something more like 29%. It could be partially because of Mitchell. I would sooner suspect it's because of the emergence of Josh Downs. But in any case, we are talking about a usage pie that's pretty small, and that we're hoping gets juiced a little by touchdown production, which I kind of do expect, actually. I believe in Shane Steichen, Anthony Richardson. I think Steichen showed last year that he envisions specifically a Colts offense that sets a jab with a run game and a jab from the Pittman pass catching threat in any given play. And it's sort of its main approach is to kind of set the defense up to try to guard itself from one of the two jabs. And even when you do guard for it, you tend to take a little bit of a hit. And if you don't guard it, you're just giving up a first down automatically. And that's how they kind of grinded their way down the field, even though Gardner Minshew was just putrid as a quarterback, even in a low volume role. So again, I think that Minshew was truly awful last year. And if Richardson is something other than great, it doesn't matter to me. And even if Richardson were to miss time, God forbid it, Joe Flacco would be a huge upgrade over Minshew. So I think Pittman, maybe he has the same low ceiling kind of concerns that we talked about with Davante Adams, but the price is a lot cheaper. And I don't think I might give Pittman the better projection, but I definitely don't give Pittman the worst projection between him and Adams.
Just saying about Joe Flacco and like how weird it is that he's kind of run the gamut of like the wings of a butterfly NFL franchises moving. Like, he played for the Baltimore Ravens, who used to be the Cleveland Browns, and now he's in Indianapolis, who used to be the Baltimore Colts. I don't know. Weird to me. Joe's
The eye
path.
on the dollar bill, John.
Yeah, I fold this $20 bill in such a way, and what do you see? But beyond that, I think that everything that we've discussed here is enough for me to where it's like I have probably enough DJ Moore. I'm going to start mixing in some Pittman. I think it's time.
I should do that too. I definitely have a bunch of DJ Moore. I don't know what the number is, but it's not reasonable, in my opinion, to have like a projection this year that ultimately says like, oh, Michael Pittman will lose work to anyone particular. That's the one thing that doesn't seem possible to me, and I think his current ADP, it seems to almost expect it.
And I think that there does seem to be like of the very few like kind of prevailing narratives I've seen about Pittman this year. It's like you have to absolutely stack him with Anthony Richardson. Like that, otherwise it's bupkis. It's no, if he's getting 30% target share of any NFL offense with a pulse, that is good enough on its own. Like
they're going to score points. They
yourself.
Didn't even score points last year. They're going to score points this year because the quarterback's way better. The running back's way better. The offensive line is way better. And the offense has a variety of threats for route runners now. So, I would expect Pittman to basically have the same catch and yardage count as last year, but with at least 8 touchdowns rather than 4.
Would love to see that. And that is absolutely worth investing in as a mid to late third round type of pick in your leagues. Before we get on over to the next guy, we've got a message from our friends over at ACME Real Fantasy Football. What's with fantasy football scores looking like an NBA All-Star game? Let's get real with ACME Real Fantasy Football. The top pro teams average around 28 points a game. This is how ACME Real Fantasy Football scoring system is based. The system is also very accurate compared to the actual game score. Each team drafts only 9 players filling the primary positions. Benches are only used for injured players and bye weeks. This leaves 200 free agents available to improve your team. Weekly waivers give the preference to the bottom of the standings. League rankings are constantly changing, keeping it competitive throughout the entire season. ACME Real Fantasy Football also has a one-of-a-kind playoff format, selecting a new lineup each week. All teams are competing from week 1 through the Super Bowl. 12-team leagues start at only $120. It's $10 a team if you did the math there. Go to acmerealfantasyfootball.com and sign up today. Again, that's acmerealfantasyfootball.com. Get yourself signed up over there. We also got a message from our friends at Fantrax. Is there something you wish your fantasy league had or features that are missing from your current leagues? Bonus scoring, custom schedules, or playoffs? Deeper team settings? Well, look no further because we have you covered with our friends at Fantrax. Fantrax is the most customizable fantasy platform in the industry, offering the greatest fantasy experience for your dynasty, keeper, redraft, and best ball leagues. Fantrax even offers college fantasy football leagues. Create or join a fantasy football commissioner league. Invite your friends and dominate your draft this season. Fantrax is the top dynasty football platform in the industry. Are you coming from another service? Not a problem. Fantrax can easily import any of your current leagues and rosters. Ever have a trade go wrong or make a mistake in dropping a player? Fantrax commissioner tools allow you to undo any move with one simple click. Fantrax is running a special promotion that you don't want to miss. Sign up for free at fantrax.com/RotoWire today to enter for your chance to win tickets to any regular season NFL game for you and your entire league, plus $6,000 in spending cash. That's right, tickets for your entire league. Simply create a new league or bring over your existing leagues for more chances to win. Simply go to fantrax.com/RotoWire and sign up today. Fantrax, the home of fantasy sports. Mario, we just briefly touched on Joe Flacco and his footprint in the 2024 or 2023 NFL scene. Why was that? Because he made Amari Cooper wide receiver 10 last year. I have all the thanks to give to those two guys for helping my best ball teams last season. Amari Cooper, despite that last year, is being drafted as wide receiver 29 this year. And again, he fits the mold. He's a guy that not a lot of people are talking about. No one's super excited to be taking Amari Cooper. But I suppose where I lean with this is just I'm a little bit skeptical that Deshaun Watson ever gets it back. And things were so freewheeling down the stretch in Cleveland last year. It was true, like, F it mode. Let's see what happens. It's going to be a little bit more tense, I feel like, this year. I mean, I'm not worried about the addition of Jerry Jeudy, like, really changing things as far as Cooper's role within the offense or anything like that. But I suppose that the truth lies somewhere in the middle. Like, is he going to be as bad as wide receiver 29 would imply? Probably not. But is he going to have another wide receiver 10 season with current Deshaun Watson? I'm skeptical there as well.
Yeah, Cooper's pretty easily the toughest one on the list for me so far because he's proven for years now that he's a good player. He's not gonna fail for being a fraud or anything like that. But he has had a pretty long history of getting nicked up at various points, and I don't, as easily as some other receivers in his range of the ADP, envision a 17-game season, and especially not like a 1,000 snap kind of season. So between those details and, yeah, like you said, the Watson thing is just so weird. I don't know how to approach it at all. It's part of why I haven't picked any Browns pass catchers a whole lot, even though I think Cooper's really good, even though I'm a big fan of David Njoku. Even some of their rotational guy, Jeudy, I think could draw, a target every 6 snaps or something like that. But if Deshaun Watson is throwing these wiffle ball passes that he was in the spring, granted that was much sooner in his shoulder recovery than whatever we'll be talking about in week 1. It still is the kind of footage that's hard for me anyway to forget. And getting assurance from the team that, it'll be better by week 1 though, don't worry. Maybe it will be. I'm in no position to know either way, but they're saying so doesn't mean a whole lot to me either. So again, almost like the scenario of thinking like, well, what if AJ Brown does get hurt? Maybe I should pick DeVonta Smith. I should probably be more considerate of the possibility that Deshaun Watson's shoulder kind of just becomes okay. Like if Deshaun Watson becomes even 3/4 of the player that he was with the Texans this year for the Browns, then I will wish I had more Amari Cooper. It's probably as simple as that. I just have no idea how to call it either way.
It's really hard. I despite talking about it with you on this pod, like I still don't really know where I land with Cooper. And I just always feel like I'm going to eschew him for someone that's a little bit more exciting, or I'm hunting at a different position. Like I'll take Isaiah Pacheco instead of him. I'll take Zay Flowers instead of him. Maybe that's the toss up. Let's see. Matt B mentioned in the comments Christian Kirk. I think that he's another guy that kind of fits this mold. So do you have much Kirk in between? I have those more two, Kirk. Who do you prefer? Okay.
I have more Kirk, but I think it's because Kirk is usually cheaper. And so the reason is not so much that it's not because I have the guts to rank Kirk ahead of Cooper. It's just that the market decides for me usually.
Yeah, about a half round differential between those two, but kind of similar guys in the sense that, they project as wide receiver ones in their respective offenses. It's just hard to really make heads or tails with either offense. In Jacksonville's case, system's bad, but Christian Kirk is good. And in this case, Cooper, very good, but we just don't know what we're going to get with Watson. So in that off chance, like you said, that Watson snaps back kind of into form, it could be another year.
And I'll wish I had Elijah Moore, let alone Jeudy or Cooper and Njoku.
So I have a bit more Njoku, but that's more just because of the way the drafts play out. And I'll be sitting there, and I feel like a pretty big cliff at the tight end position once you get past Njoku. So all right, I got to take him. I have to. Otherwise, I'm going to be out here with Cole Kmet as my first tight end. And I don't want that as much as I may or may not like Cole Kmet. Let's grab a running back here and see if we can squeeze one more in after him. No one's talking about Kenneth Walker, Mario. About a year ago, everyone was talking about Kenneth Walker. Last year, runs for almost 1,000 yards. Let's see, what else did he do? 8 touchdowns, so only 1 touchdown drop-off from his previous season. He increased his receiving yardage from 165 to 259. Also added a receiving touchdown in there. Does Zach Charbonnet make some progress and make this like a more of a true 50-50 split this season? Or, if we're fading Charbonnet, then I feel like we need to be a little bit more enthusiastic about Walker. Walker's interesting to me also because he's kind of like the only running back that goes in that range, right? Like you have tons and tons of receivers going in that mix, but like Joe Mixon goes about a half a round earlier than Walker, and then half a round later you get to like your David Montgomerys, but he's sort of on an island a little bit if you get a little bit granular with the ADP, and a lot of the times I am taking receiver at that stage, so I'm out on Walker. But what's the case for and against him this year, and which side are you on?
I think Walker's one of those players where it's permissible to have a lot of different portfolio goals. Like if you're the kind of person who does a lot of zero running back kind of stuff, it would probably make sense to look at Walker as one of your staple guys because he's not as expensive as some of these other running backs. He should be a starter, not maybe a workhorse exactly, but for the price, nothing you can complain about. And he's a good player, in my opinion. It's not that I have any concerns about him. I don't even really have that much concern. The offensive line for the Seahawks was not so great last year, but I don't have any concerns about Geno Smith. I think that this new offensive coordinator might be better than Waldron, Grubb, or whatever the Washington guy's name is.
Mm-hmm.
I think he might be better than Waldron. So I have some amount of optimism for the Seahawks. And again, Walker's not so expensive that it's not like a repulsive price, in my opinion, even if you're not really a Walker buyer. It's just, in my case, I see a similar workload projection for guys like Devin Singletary, certainly James Conner. And again, I sort of, if nothing else, let the market decide for me. So that's why I'm not ending up with a whole lot of Walker. But if Charbonnet were to miss time, it would not shock me if Walker had a really high finish at running back, because I expect the Seahawks to be pretty good. Walker's pretty good. But I also do think Charbonnet is pretty good. I think Charbonnet is at least as good of a prospect as Walker was. And it's going to be tough to keep a guy like Charbonnet on the bench, I think. Maybe the Seahawks go more up-tempo and run more plays from scrimmage and just get both of them on the field by that way. But otherwise, I just kind of I'm not getting a whole lot of Charbonnet either, because it's like I if Walker does not get hurt, I don't want to predict that Charbonnet is playing ahead of him exactly. I don't really see that either. So it's largely a hands-off situation to me.
Yeah, I really haven't touched the Seattle backfield much at all, either in Walker's case or Charbonnet. Maybe I need to reframe my Charbonnet take just a little bit, because his snap count was only 24 fewer snaps than Kenneth Walker a year ago. So, I mean, that's
a lot of blitz pickup. But
that's true.
Yeah, they could. I think Charbonnet can run and catch the ball perfectly fine. It's not like he's not a Roshan Johnson fullback, kind of deal.
So, I think worst case, like Seattle could get more out of this combo than it did a year ago, and Ryan Grubb can find a way to exploit things a little bit more, and if the passing game is humming at a more efficient clip, then defenses are going to have to spend more time being worried about, in the event that Seattle has 3 upwards of 4, legitimate pass catching targets between DK, Lockett, JSN, Noah Fant.
They should be able to scale up.
You might see some lighter boxes. Yeah.
They have real ammo to work with if they open it up a bit.
I could see that as well. One last guy to mention here before we sign off. Curtis Samuel has an ADP of 88. Why is that?
I'm not sure. I guess there's a general theme in the ADP this year of people finding rookie receivers just fascinating, tantalizing, and most people drafting anyway seem to very easily imagine best case scenarios with rookies in ways that they can't with veterans. But John, you and I both have followed college football very closely for a long time, and We probably remember when Curtis Samuel was a high-ranking running back recruit at Ohio State, and he raked as a runner before they moved him to receiver, where he also raked. And the period of struggle for Curtis Samuel with the Panthers pretty much just coincided with the reign of Kyle Allen and a bunch of other bums. And so it's easy for me to sort of keep consistently in my mind the idea that Curtis Samuel has just been good this whole time. Maybe more than most people, not as a wide receiver one type necessarily, but I could see Samuel pretty easily being the most productive fantasy wide receiver for the Bills, if only because it's probably going to be horizontally oriented. There might be a good bit of rotation between Samuel, Shakir, Keon Coleman, apparently Matt Collins, even though he's a bum. But Dalton Kincaid's going to get 90 or 100 catches, I figure. So, speed, big playability might be the difference between the Bills receivers, who otherwise might have a similar target count in each case. Samuel, even with his low yards per target in Washington and Carolina, even with his low depth of target, he's still a big play threat. And this is the first good offense he's ever played in the NFL. Best quarterback pretty easily he's played with in the NFL.
Yeah, all of those are pretty big marks in his
Joe
favor.
Brady loves him.
These are all huge, factors there. And I felt like just combing through the ADP, I was a little bit surprised to see him where he's going, but you can certainly talk yourself into an upside scenario with Samuel, especially given, the other relative uncertainties within that Bills wide receiver room. That's going to wrap it up for us here on this edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. A big thanks to our sponsors over at Circa, over at ACME Real Fantasy Football, and over at Fantrax. For Mario Puig, I'm John McKechnie. Thanks for listening.